but it's always having the end of the movie in my head and then filling in the script. The script might change. There might be, call an audible and you have to rewrite the script, but the end of the script was always the same. So, the Marquis Jet story, my partner and I were guests on a private jet when I was 27 or 28 years old. And when we walked onto the airplane, it was like the scene in The Wizard of Oz when everything goes from black and white to color. We're like, people fly like this? This is unbelievable. I want to fly like this. And by the time we landed, we're like, let's start a private jet company. We're like, definitely, so we could fly privately, except we had no airplanes. So we went to a company called NetJets, owned by Warren Buffett, the 800-pound gorilla. They had 600-plus airplanes in the fleet, and pitched this idea for a 25-hour prepaid jet card, which was called Marquis Jet.
How'd you get that interview, like that time with them?
Oh, it's a crazy story. I had a friend of mine who called me up, and prior to that, I was putting experiences together for wealthy people, like impossible to get experiences. And a friend of mine called me up and said that he had a friend whose daughter was turning 16, and he wanted to do something at the Christina Aguilera concert. And I happened to have a relationship with the management company. And I got his daughter on as kind of like a backup singer kind of thing with the mic off. And the guy called me up after the concert, like the next day she was the star of the town. Everyone was talking about it. And he was like, I have no idea who you are or what you do, but if you ever need anything, call me. Like, that was amazing what you did for my daughter. And it turns out he was the president of this company called NetJets that owned all these airplanes. So a year later, when we had this idea, I was like, I think I know someone in this business. Like the guy that we had sing his daughter sang at the Aguilera concert, and that's how we got the meeting.
Wow.
But the meeting, actually, when we pitched the idea, the meeting lasted 12 minutes and they threw us out. And the president of NetJets said, and this is almost a direct quote, he said, cool idea, but if you think we're going to give two kids that didn't break 1,000 on their SAT, which, Tom, pissed me off. I got like a 980. But I've convinced myself, I've gotten over, keep telling yourself you broke 1,000. He's like, I'm never giving you guys access to our airplanes. When we started the company, this is back in 2000, so I had no sophisticated way to get leads. I didn't know a lot of wealthy people. And the only way that I could really build my database or sell anybody was to go to events where rich people hung out. So I heard about this conference called the TED. I didn't even know what it was, in Monterey, California. So I flew commercial, transferred 3 flights, drove 6 hours when I landed to get to TED to try to pitch this idea to anyone that would listen. But when I got to the TED conference, it was like Fort Knox. Everybody had credentials, double credentials, and I had nothing. And they wouldn't let me anywhere near the venue. So I went to the local coffee shop and just trying to figure out how I'm gonna get in or sneak in or get someone to get me in or get access. And I realized like every hour or two, everyone with credentials was walking into the coffee shop and they were buying lattes and muffins and lattes and muffins and lattes and muffins. So the next morning, I woke up at 5 o'clock and I went to the coffee shop and I bought every single muffin that they had. I took all the inventory out of the shop. I'm like, I'll take all your muffins. They gave me like 80 muffins. And I was sitting, and then when the first wave of TED attendees, broke for their break and they came, one of the customers said, can I have a latte and a muffin? And the guy said, well, I'll give you a latte, but we're all out of muffins. And when he was walking out, I said, excuse me, sir. Look, I happen to have an extra muffin. Actually, I have 800 of them. But if you want a muffin, you can have one of my muffins. It's like, no, get out of here. I said, no, I realized that we started, well, what do you do? What are you doing here? We started having a conversation, and he said, do you mind if I join you? And I said, my only thought was like, you are qualified to buy a card. You can join me. And he was my first sale. He was my first sale. The guy who owned a company that sold it to eBay. And that was the start of the adrenaline rush of, okay, let me try to crack this code of, how we can build this thing with not a big database. It's always been having, for me, it's been probably similar to you when you started your business, but it's always having the end of the movie in my head and then filling in the script. So I knew I was going to leave there with a sale. I just had to write the script. And the script might change. There might be, call an audible and you have to rewrite the script. But the end of the script was always the same. I'm going to run 100 miles. Okay, well, how are you going to do that, Jesse? You're not like a crazy endurance runner. Well, then let's think backwards of how, but it starts with the end scene in the movie, even the exit. You know, like, okay, we're going to build this to sell. I don't know who I'm going to sell it to. But that's sort of been always kind of the mentality. And I think the second point to that is once you get over the fear of being embarrassed, you know, no one likes to be embarrassed. But once you get over being scared of being embarrassed, it's super liberating. And it allows you to go into lanes that otherwise you wouldn't go into.
The amount of places you've been able to get your foot in the door are pretty impressive. Have you done things strategically knowing, like, this is going to help me meet people that could potentially one day open a door for me somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, well, networking's been a big part of my life forever. When I was 24 years old, I wrote 10 letters a day, thank you notes, to anyone that came into my life that impacted me. And it could be, even if I didn't know you, but I saw your show and I was like, you know what, Tom, you've had some amazing guests I've really benefited from. I would just write you a handwritten note because, one, the handwritten note shows intent. You have to buy the envelope, buy the stationery, write the letter, lick the envelope, get the stamp, put it in the... That's a lot different than hitting send. It's also memorable. How many handwritten letters have you gotten this year? So I literally wrote 3,000 letters in 1 year. And it could be to a doorman, cab driver, it could be anyone. I would just get their card and I would thank them. That was my form of networking. Even to this day, the people that you meet in your 20s rise up in their 30s and are in great positions of power in their 40s. You don't know when you're in your 20s who's gonna make it and who's not. So, you know, you treat everybody properly and respectfully and you stay in touch. And very often those relationships merge their heads years later, decades later.